Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk to you about spiritual matter. This has been something that's been rattling around in my head since I was about 11 years old. I think of it often, and although I'm not a Christian, I'm not any religion, I have my own beliefs, and sometimes the hurt that's been done to me by Christians and by Christianity and the insanity of it and all the things about it that upset me, sometimes I want to just wipe my hands and be like, there's nothing to any of this. There is no God. There's no big spirit in the sky. There's no universal spirit. There's just us. There's just us being shitty to each other, and that's evil. And when we're good to each other, that's God. Whatever, I think some days none of this is real and none of this is worth it. But I've kind of developed my own kind of relationship with what I consider to be God, which is not like the mean God of the Bible at all, and it's not an old man. It's just, anyway, it's what I personally believe right now. That may change. I hope I don't go full atheist, because I do like having the thought of this spirit in my life. But one thing that really keeps me coming back, I think, is that if there's true evil in the spirit world, then there's got to be true good as well. And by true evil, I mean non-human evil. And I'm the first one to roll my eyes when I start hearing people talking about demon possession and watching Bob Larson's, who I think is the biggest buffoon and has done a lot of damage to the whole field, because there's a lot of fakery and BS going on there. But I've seen true evil, and not just in people. I mean, I've seen that in people, like unbearably cruel, evil acts that human beings will perpetrate on other living things. That's pretty evil. I wouldn't say the devil made somebody do it necessarily, because there's whole psychology that goes into people ending up being crazy and violent and mean. But there is, all right, here it is. I believe what I experience. I have never experienced Jesus, no matter how many times I've asked him, and I still do sometimes. And as a child being horribly abused, I would cry to Jesus to help me and get me out of it and make it stop, and he wouldn't, and he didn't listen, and he wasn't there. And for me, Jesus doesn't exist. It's a sweet notion. I have some little Jesus knicky-knacks around, because it's kind of a sweet notion, and the supposed teachings of this person were mostly very, very good. And if Christians would just follow them, then that would be aces, but they don't tend to. But we used to go to this church. Gosh, what was the name of it? We went to a lot of churches. My dad church hopped us from one to the next to the next. Until I was 10, we went to a United Pentecostal church, which is some crazy holy rolling. It's some craziness. Very restrictive. Women aren't allowed to cut their hair even a little. You're not allowed to wear any kind of makeup. You're not allowed to wear pants. Your dresses have to be, well below your knees, and all these really restrictive things that are particularly for women. Men just, don't grow a beard. Was about it. We got out of that when I was 10, and we hopped from church to church. But at some point there, when I was a teenager, well, no, I was maybe 11, so it was one of the first churches that we hopped to, I guess, after we got our hair cut and got out of that insanity. But Joel Osteen, y'all probably all have heard of Joel Osteen. His father, John, and his mother, Dodie, had this little new church in Houston, Texas. It was a corrugated metal building like you would see being used for a warehouse. And the floors were just gray concrete, no carpet, no paint, just gray concrete, and we sat on folding metal chairs. And that church grew and grew and grew, because it did have a good spirit to it. It's very lively, very upbeat, very young, youthful. And honestly, a lot of the times they talked more about the devil and demons than they did about Jesus and angels and God. It became an obsession with evil, and it was kind of exciting sometimes, because I always liked horror movies and things like that. So, what's more scary than that, right? And when I was little, it did a lot of damage to me, all that scariness. But, when I started getting, in those double digits. I found some of it exciting, although it was very frightening and upsetting as well. But they were very focused on that aspect. And there was one night, it was a Sunday night, that we noticed coming in, or I noticed, a lot of us noticed. I believe it was 3 women, 2 that were bringing in a third, and she was a relative, like a daughter or sister or something. They were all obviously very, very poor. They had dirty, stringy hair. They were all pretty plump. The woman they were bringing in was very heavy. I'd say now, looking back, she was maybe, I don't know, 250 to 280. As a child, she seemed just huge, because there weren't a lot of really heavy people back then. There just weren't. She seemed huge. And she was clearly, from looking at her, she was not, trying to think of polite words, she was not typical, okay? She was definitely an adult, probably in her early 20s, late teens, early 20s, something like that. She seemed very sort of chaotic, like she didn't quite know where she was, and she would get upset. She was whining and growling and making strange noises, and it was obvious that she was profoundly retarded. Profoundly mentally retarded, okay? I'm not using that as some kind of a negative word. That was what we called it back then. She was mentally retarded. And she had those eyes that you can look at them and tell in an instant that she was blind. It's the kind of eyes you see on people who were born with blindness. Very atrophied, weird little flat, dry looking somethings way back, and her eyelids and everything went way back into her head. Y'all know the look. We've all seen it. So she wasn't seeing, she didn't seem to be able to communicate with words. We found out later that she had the mentality of about a 2-year-old on good days, and that she was indeed blind. There was no doubt about that. And she was nonverbal. Okay. So all during the service, there were scuffles happening over there. I remember they were to the left and in the section, like the section to my left. There were little scuffles where she would try to get up and bolt, and they would grab her and bring her back. And it was a constant fight and a struggle. Now, maybe that's the way she always is. It could be, because I don't know the girl. I don't know what she was like at home. And it may have been that she's also autistic. Maybe all of the crazy noise and the instruments and the people, maybe it frightened her and she was trying to leave. I think about this a lot and try to kind of not just be superstitious about it. So those things are like, well, maybe it could have been this or that, okay? But then there was a point at which I had to finally realize that something was seriously not right. And she frightened me. It could be because she was a great big, grubby looking adult who was mentally retarded and causing a fuss, causing a scene. It was just scary. There's something really weird about her. And at the end of the service, they did an altar call, which for those of you that don't attend a church, it's like at the end of a service, they'll have people, anybody that needs to be prayed for or needs somebody to talk to come up to the front of the church. And there would be men and women up there and the preacher, and they would go through the line and talk to people briefly and pray for them, and somebody help them back to their seats, and they get their little anointing oil and stuff. And it's kind of nice. I think it helps some people. I don't know about miraculous healings, but I think feeling loved and feeling like somebody's put that little blessing on you and gone to God for you and asked for something good in your life, I can't say that that's a bad thing. So somebody came up and said, we've got a really big problem back here. There's this girl and she is possessed. And so they did all of the altar calls, got that over with. It was a long process because a lot of people are having problems in their life and they're crying and they're desperate and they needed some real counseling. So by the time that all finished up, a lot of the men, especially the men, stayed behind, and they managed to keep this girl seated, and they put her in a chair, and the men got all around her, standing up all around her, somebody behind her, on all sides of her. And she was almost impossible to restrain. Being fat does not mean being muscly and strong. You can throw your weight at somebody and maybe do more than a thin person would, but there's no extra muscle there, especially with someone who's that profoundly disabled. Probably doesn't get out and walk up and down the street and get any real exercise. It would take 6 or 7 of them to hold her down when she decided to get up. This nonverbal blind girl would turn and look directly into the eyes of one of those men. And she would either spit, hit him right in the eye, good aim for a blind girl, or she would start talking to them. And she'd be like, who are you? Who are you to tell me to come out of this woman? Who are you to even be here praying when you were doing, and she would name off in detail egregious sins that they had committed that were their dirty little secrets that nobody knew about. And she would turn to the other. And some of the guys left because it was too much. They all want to think, oh, there's the devil and there's demons. But then when they're really confronted with it, and that demon's looking at them through the blind, shriveled eyes of a woman with a 2-year-old's mentality, and repeating and telling in detail dirty little things that they had done that nobody else knew about but them and the Lord, and I guess the devil. And it was alarming. They worked on her for hours and hours. And finally they would call out the spirits. How many of you are there? And I forget how many she said. And they would deal with one at a time and demand that spirit tell what its name was. And most people think that demons have names like Beelzebub, or some kind of fancy, impressive kind of name. But it seems that, at least from what I've seen, and a lot of churches believe this, that they go by the name of what they came into the person's life to do, or to encourage them towards certain things. So they would call them out, and one of them was like the spirit of suicide, and one of them was the spirit of murder, and it told about how it was going to make her murder the women that take care of her family, and how she'd never spend a day in jail for it because of her mental condition. And the spirit of suicide once said that it was going to make her kill herself as soon as that service was over, and that's why she was trying to get out of it and not have the deliverance done, because she had big plans for her night. And I can't say that she spoke in like a heavy male voice, but to go from being someone that communicates by going, oh yeah, and crying and just not being able to express herself with words, to being able to, well, what I just told you, it was unbelievable. But it happened, and I saw it with my own eyes. They kept shooing me off as kids were supposed to go play up on the altar or something. And they had her in the back of the church. But I kept sneaking over there because the men were so wrapped up in and so discombobulated by these demons, supposed something in her, whatever word you want to use. There was jinn, demons, negative entities, negative energy, whatever you want to call it. She had something going on inside of her that was not her normal thing. And by the time it was all over, it was 2 o'clock in the morning. And I think they got them all. I don't know what happened to her after that. I don't know what her life was like. I hope it was clear and free and as happy as possible for her to be. The next day, my mother took me to school right after lunch. And I had a note to excuse me. I don't remember what it said, but I'm pretty sure it did not say, please excuse Alyssa from only being here for half a day. She was up till 2 a.m. at an exorcism at our wacky church. But I like to often brag as one of the little facts about me, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I imagine it's pretty safe to say it is, that I'm the only person in the Pasadena, Texas school district history or the history of it, to ever be excused from an absence due to exorcism. Anyway, that's my story. It was creepy. I still see it rather clearly in my mind, and I think about it often. And to me, that is my reminder that there is something invisible to us that is purely evil, does not have our best intentions at heart, and can get inside of somebody and make them do and say things that would not even be possible for them otherwise. That's my story. Dad used to try to have me exercise because I liked pop music and boys and wanted to be pretty. And so it meant that I was possessed. He tried to burn all my Barry Manilow records once because it's that evil rock and roll. That's a story for another day. Anyway, I love you guys. I hope you enjoy my little tale. Take it for whatever you want to take it for. Bye. Where's the button? There's a button here somewhere. Bye.